Long ago, during the reign of a powerful Persian king named Ahasuerus, an extraordinary young woman changed the course of history. Her name was Esther. She was not born into royalty. She did not grow up in a palace. She did not possess great wealth or political power. In fact, Esther was an orphan. Her parents had died when she was young, leaving her in the care of her older cousin, Mordecai. Despite the hardships she faced, Esther grew into a young woman known for her beauty, wisdom, humility, and kindness. Neither Esther nor Mordecai could have imagined that God was preparing her for one of the most important missions in biblical history. At that time, the Persian Empire stretched across vast lands, ruling over many nations and peoples. King Ahasuerus sat upon one of the most powerful thrones in the world. One day, after a series of events in the royal court, the king began searching for a new queen. Young women from across the empire were brought to the palace. Among them was Esther. When the king saw her, something immediately stood out. Esther found favor in his eyes. Of all the women presented before him, he chose Esther. A royal crown was placed upon her head. The orphan became a queen. The young woman who once lived in obscurity now lived within the palace walls. Yet there was something the king did not know. Esther was Jewish. At Mordecai's instruction, she had not revealed her heritage. Meanwhile, outside the palace, a dangerous man was rising to power. His name was Haman. Haman became one of the highest-ranking officials in the kingdom. He loved power. He loved attention. And he demanded that everyone bow before him. Whenever Haman walked through the streets, people lowered themselves before him. Everyone except Mordecai. Mordecai refused to bow, not because he was disrespectful, but because his loyalty belonged to God. Haman noticed, and his pride was wounded. His anger grew. Day after day, he became consumed with hatred toward Mordecai, but soon his hatred expanded beyond one man. When Haman discovered that Mordecai was Jewish, he decided to target all Jewish people throughout the empire. His hatred became a deadly plan. Haman approached the king with lies and deception. "There is a certain people scattered throughout your kingdom," he said. "Their laws are different from everyone else's. It is not in your interest to tolerate them." Without realizing the true consequences, the king gave Haman authority to act. A decree was issued. On a designated day, every Jewish man, woman, and child throughout the empire could be destroyed. The decree spread rapidly. Fear swept across Jewish communities. Families wept. Parents held their children tightly. Many wondered if their people would survive. When Mordecai learned about the decree, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. He mourned openly. Soon news reached Queen Esther. At first, she did not fully understand what had happened. She sent messengers to learn more. When Mordecai explained the situation, he urged Esther to act. "You must go to the king and plead for your people." But Esther faced a terrible dilemma. Approaching the king without an invitation was forbidden. According to Persian law, anyone who entered the king's presence uninvited could be executed immediately. Even the queen was not exempt. The only exception occurred if the king extended his golden scepter. Esther had not been summoned for 30 days. Entering the throne room could cost her life. Fear gripped her heart. She sent word to Mordecai explaining the danger. Then Mordecai delivered one of the most powerful messages in Scripture. "Do not think that because you live in the king's palace, you alone will escape. If you remain silent at this time, deliverance will arise from another place. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Those words pierced Esther's heart. For such a time as this. Suddenly, Esther understood. God had not placed her in the palace by accident. Her position was not merely a privilege, it was a calling. The crown was not just for honor, it was for purpose. The moment had come. Esther made her decision. She sent a message back to Mordecai, "Gather all the Jews. Fast for me for 3 days and 3 nights. My servants and I will fast also." Then she spoke the words that would define her legacy forever. "If I perish, I perish." For 3 days the Jewish people prayed and fasted. For 3 days Esther sought God. Then the time came. Dressed in her royal robes, Esther walked toward the throne room. Every step carried risk. Every step could be her last. The massive doors opened. The king sat upon his throne. Officials filled the room. Silence fell as Esther entered. The king looked up. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Would he reject her? Would she be arrested? Would she die? Then something incredible happened. The king smiled. He extended the golden scepter. Esther's life was spared. The king welcomed her. "What is your request, Queen Esther?" he asked. "Even up to half my kingdom, it shall be given to you." But Esther moved carefully. Instead of immediately revealing Haman's plot, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet. The king agreed. At the banquet, Esther invited them to a second banquet the following day. Meanwhile, Haman's pride continued growing. He boasted about his wealth, power, and influence. Yet he remained furious that Mordecai still refused to bow. His anger became so intense that he ordered a giant gallows to be built. He planned to execute Mordecai. But God was already working behind the scenes. That night, the king could not sleep. Unable to rest, he ordered the royal records to be read aloud. As they read, they discovered something remarkable. Years earlier, Mordecai had uncovered a plot to assassinate the king. His actions had saved the king's life. Yet Mordecai had never been rewarded. The king immediately asked what honor had been given to him. The answer was shocking. Nothing. The next morning, Haman entered the palace intending to request Mordecai's execution. Before he could speak, the king asked him a question. What should be done for a man the king wishes to honor? Thinking the king was referring to him, Haman described a grand celebration. Royal robes, a royal horse, public recognition. The king smiled. Excellent. Do all those things for Mordecai. Haman was humiliated. The very man he wanted to destroy was publicly honored. But an even greater reversal was coming. Later that day, at Esther's second banquet, the king once again asked her request. This time, Esther revealed the truth. She explained that her people had been condemned to death. She exposed the wicked decree. She identified the man responsible. The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. The room fell silent. The king was furious. Everything became clear. The lies, the deception, the plot. Haman suddenly realized his power had vanished. The king ordered his arrest. Then came a dramatic twist. The very gallows Haman built for Mordecai became the instrument of his own downfall. Haman's evil plan collapsed completely. But the danger to the Jewish people remained, because Persian law could not be reversed. A new decree was issued allowing the Jewish people to defend themselves. When the appointed day arrived, they stood together. Their enemies were defeated. Their families survived. Their nation was preserved. What seemed like certain destruction became miraculous deliverance. Joy replaced mourning. Celebration replaced fear. Hope replaced despair. The people established a yearly festival called Purim to remember how God had saved them. And at the center of the story stood Esther, a young orphan girl who became a queen. a queen who chose courage over fear, a woman who risked her life to save her people. Esther's story reminds us that God often works behind the scenes. His name is never directly mentioned in the book of Esther, yet his hand appears on every page. He positioned Esther in the palace. He gave her favor. He interrupted the king's sleep. He exposed the enemy. He protected his people. Again and again, God was working even when no one could see it. The same remains true today. There are moments when we face difficult decisions, moments when courage is required, moments when doing what is right comes at a cost. Like Esther, we may feel afraid. We may feel inadequate. We may wonder whether we are capable. But God often places people exactly where they need to be for His purposes. Esther could have remained silent. She could have protected herself. She could have chosen safety. Instead, she chose faith. And because of her courage, an entire nation was saved. Her story continues to inspire generations because it reveals a timeless truth. God can use ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. And sometimes, the reason you are where you are today is because God has placed you there for such a time as this.